You know, it never ceases to amaze me how God puts an agenda together for us on a Sunday morning. I had no idea that they would be singing that last song, but that basically encapsulates what God has put on my heart for you this morning, and it's about trusting God and standing on the solid rock. You know, we have a lot of Bible promises that talk about love, joy, and peace in the Holy Ghost. But have you noticed, as you look around the body of Christ, how few of us actually experience that day to day? When you look around, you see a lot of people burdened by stress. Now, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Stress is kind of like a carbon monoxide detector. Now, most of you probably have these in your houses because carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas that you can't smell, you can't see, you can't taste, but when it exceeds certain levels, it's deadly to humans. It's called a silent killer because it can overcome people before they even realize that the levels of carbon monoxide have exceeded safe levels. And stress is kind of like that. When we're feeling stress, it's a signal of some poisonous thinking that over time can actually kill our joy and kill our life and our peace. So today I want to talk a little bit about one of the things in my life that created a lot of stress, a lot of things that killed my joy. It's I'm entitling it Confessions of a Recovering Controller, because one of the things that caused me the most stress was my drive to control my life and almost everything in it. And stress was something that I was very familiar with because whatever came along, I was trying to control it. So, you know, you already know I'm a word person. I like to know the origin of words. So, control. It's an early 14th century word meaning to check, to verify, or regulate. And where it comes from is a medieval method of keeping duplicate accounts. So keeping duplicate registers to check the accuracy of what somebody else was keeping track of. So one person would keep the accounts, somebody else would keep basically a duplicate. They would check for once in a while to make sure that everything was in sync. The concept of dominate, so when you think about controlling, dominating, or directing, didn't come around until about a century later, but today I want to focus on the 14th century meaning, because I think a lot of us have a register that is a duplicate of another register. And the other register is the one that God creates for us when He has us in His heart, even before we come into being. And when our register and God's register don't match, we create stress for ourselves. So I want to talk about, there's lots of areas in which I was trying to maintain control. I want to talk about the top 4 that I was trying to control: my future, my agenda, my outcomes, and my performance. And like the controller on the right side, I was trying to push the right buttons and make things happen the way that I wanted them to happen. So control of my future, what did that look like? For me, it meant I missed a lot of what was going on in the present moment because I was far too focused on the future and where I was going. I was very destination-minded, so too focused on earning a degree in university to enjoy the process of being at university. Too focused on the wedding, so I couldn't enjoy the engagement. Too focused on having the baby, so I couldn't enjoy the pregnancy. Because for me, it was all about getting where I wanted to go. And so people used to say, Nancy, you just need to enjoy the journey. You need to enjoy the process. And I hated that because I didn't like the process. I just wanted to get where I wanted to go. And I missed a lot of life in between because I was so focused on goals. And there's nothing wrong with goals. But if that's what you're focused on exclusively and you miss all the life that happens on the way to getting the goal, the focus is a little bit skewed. And I was constantly looking to the next stage. Well, when I'm done university, then I'll be happy. When I have a great job, then I'll be happy. When I get married, then I'll be happy. When I have kids, then I'll be happy. When I get that promotion, everything's going to be great. When I retire. And so it was always looking to the next stage and never being in the present moment. So it was really looking at where I wanted to be. And sometimes that was coming out of a concern about what would happen. So I was trying to kind of control where I was going. And sometimes it was just really eagerly looking forward to the next stage. And then I would get irritated with detours or things that got in my way, that delayed my progress and made me go a different way, because I was very focused on, I wanted to get there. If I had to go this way, I created a lot of stress and frustration for myself. And I want to just read an excerpt from The Shack that really spoke to me. This book has changed my life, literally, because there's a picture of the Father heart of God in here that I had never seen before. And it changed my perspective on God's love. I'd heard about God's love all my life, but this presented a picture of the Trinity and their tender care that I had never seen before. So there's a section in here where Jesus is talking to Mac, the main character, and he's asked Mac where he spends most of his time in his mind. And Mac replies, he thought for a minute before answering, I suppose I would have to say that I spend very little time in the present. For me, I spend a big piece in the past, but most of the rest of the time, I'm trying to figure out the future. And Jesus says, not unlike most people, when I dwell with you, I do so in the present. I live in the present. That's why he's called I am. Not the past, although much can be remembered and learned by looking back, but only for a visit, not an extended stay. And for sure, I do not dwell in the future you visualize or imagine. Mac, do you realize that your imagination of the future, which is almost always dictated by fear of some kind, rarely, if ever, pictures me there with you? Again, Mac stopped and thought. It was true. He spent a lot of time fretting and worrying about the future, and in his imaginations, it was usually pretty gloomy and depressing, if not outright horrible. And Jesus was also correct in saying that in Mac's imaginations of the future, God was always absent. When I was trying to control the future, that's a very clear picture of what I was thinking. Because I wasn't, at that point, convinced of God's love for me, and so I felt I had to take care of all the things that were coming and to plan for them. Whoop. Next, I tried to control my agenda. The agenda being that things had to look a certain way. It had to be my way. It had to go my way. It had to be my process, because after all, I knew what was best, the best way. So I hated surprises. I hated the unexpected. And to this day, I cringe about a memory that goes way back to the early days of our marriage, where I was expecting our first baby, and we were out looking for a house. And Ernie had the address, couldn't find the address, so he suggested we stop by a friend's house to look in the paper and verify that we had the right address. This was before the internet, so I'm dating myself. So we stopped by her place, she invites me in, and lo and behold, surprise! It's a baby shower, right? And I am dressed in my slobbiest clothes, I've got no makeup on, my hair is greasy, because we're just out looking at houses, right? I'm not expecting a party. And my reaction was to turn to him and say, how could you betray me like this? I was furious. And I sat there seething for most of the afternoon because I felt like he had betrayed me, because I hated surprises. I was not ready for a surprise shower. So I robbed myself of the joy that could have been being there with a lot of friends who loved me, who wanted to bless me. But I lashed out at him because he was the unfortunate victim who had been pulled into getting me to my friend's house. Well-meaning, but he never surprised me again. I'm okay with surprises now, but God's worked a lot in me since then. But I look back on that time and I go, his heart, my friend's heart, was not to criticize or to make it a painful incident. They were there, they wanted to make it a fun time for me, but because I couldn't deal with the unexpected, I made it something that it really was never intended to be. So constantly, I needed to know everything ahead of time. If we were going somewhere, who was going to be there, what were they going to do, what time were things happening, what should I bring, what should I wear. Rehearsing situations beforehand so that I could be ready for anything. So if there's going to be somebody there that maybe I didn't know well, I would rehearse these conversations like I had it all mapped out ahead of time. And you can only imagine how often or how not often it actually worked out the way I imagined. Not very often. I didn't have a good track record. And then, when things didn't go according to my plan, my first question was always, why? Why, God? Why would you let this happen to me? And generally speaking, he didn't answer that question, but the one time, so I've been in process with this probably about 9 years, and the one time God says, how would it help you to know why? And I said, well, then I would know, and as soon as I started saying it, I knew I was in trouble. So I said, well, then I would know if it was a good reason or not. And he said, so you mean you're trying to verify that I am good in allowing this to happen? I was like, oh, busted. Oh, crap. Right? I was keeping a duplicate register. And because my register did not line up with God's, I was asking the question, why, God? Why didn't it work this way? How could you let it work that way? Because I was checking to see that he was good. I stopped asking why at that point, because I came to realize that actually it doesn't help me. What if he tells me? How is that really going to help me? And what it highlighted in me was just, back to the last song, a lack of trust. That God was good, that he had me, that everything was being filtered through his grace. And then finally, I really didn't like emotions. Emotions are messy and unpredictable, and they get in the way of things, right? And so I'd start crying at a Tim Hortons commercial, and I'd feel like an idiot, because who cries at Tim Hortons commercials? I guess I do. But it was unpredictable. It would just hit without warning. Or I'd laugh uproariously and nobody else would be laughing. And that was embarrassing, because you're supposed to be laughing when everyone else is laughing. But there'd be times where things would just hit me funny. And I have a loud laugh, as some of you may have noticed. And so I would draw attention to myself for that. So I didn't like it. I wanted it to be calm and cool and collected, which is actually what I got rewarded for at work a lot of times, because when all chaos was happening, I managed to be very calm and collected. But I didn't like emotions. And again, what I didn't realize was emotions are the rainbows of life. Emotions give you color, give you lots of vibrancy in your life. Otherwise, it's all just shades of black and white. So control of my outcomes was another area that I was trying to control. So the agenda was how things go. The outcome is what happens at the end. So what this looked like is praying to God to do things a certain way, to do something or to do things a certain way. And so I had it in my head, the way that things should work out, maybe this couple should get together, or maybe I should get a certain job, or we should get a certain car, or I should find something for a certain price, whatever it was. I mean, this was rampant. So it was praying that God would do it that way, that that's what he would give me. Sometimes bargaining with God. Well, God, if you give me this, then I promise I'll read my Bible more, I'll pray more, I'll do whatever. Really what I was saying was, God, not your will, but mine be done. Because I was focused on the outcome that I was convinced was the best one for me. I mean, what do I know? My vision was very limited, but in my view, knowing what was important to me, I thought I had it nailed. So then when things didn't happen like I scripted, I would be disappointed or angry. Not with God. I would never admit that, although I was, because he failed me. He didn't come through. I prayed for this for so long and it didn't happen. So what happened was it began to create doubt. And it eroded my trust that God heard my prayers. And what I didn't realize was God was hearing every single thing that I said. But it was my expectations that I could manipulate God into getting me exactly what I wanted the way I wanted it. That's what the problem was. It wasn't with God. God is a rock. And he is absolutely trustworthy. But I couldn't trust him because he wasn't giving me what I wanted the way I wanted it. So then that That resulted in things where I would give something to God, take it back, give something to God, take it back. Because I really wanted to trust him, but there's all these unanswered prayers that proved to me he wasn't trustworthy. So I might give it to him, but I'd still hold on to it. And eventually I would take it back, and I really wasn't giving it to God anyway. Because when you give it to him, you take your hands off and let him work with it, right? All because I was trying to control my outcomes. And then, of course, because my identity was all based on my performance and how I did things, I was very focused on controlling my performance. Meaning that because I always felt I wasn't good enough, my performance had to be perfect. And I hated making mistakes, because mistakes meant I was a failure, mistakes meant I was not perfect. And therefore, it reinforced that I was not good enough. So I allowed a lot of shoulds to drive my behavior. Oh, I should read my Bible. I should go to church. Oh, I should do that Bible study. Oh, I should call that person. Oh, I should do this. And there was a lot of legalism in my attempts to be perfect, because I didn't know that I already was. I didn't know that God has already created each of us as perfect in our spirits. And so I was trying to attain to something that I already was. And those of you that have read my book know that there's a lot of standards that we create that are completely fictitious, but we still try to attain to them anyway. Generally, the standards we create for ourselves are way beyond our capabilities to achieve. And it's part of reinforcing that whole performance behavior and feeling not good enough. But what it led to was a constant judgment on myself and others, but mostly myself, and comparing to other people and just always feeling like I was falling short. So as much as I tried to control my performance, you all know you can never do enough or have enough to be anything, especially perfect. And so the controlling really didn't yield the results that I was looking for. I was very worried about what others would think. So what would they think about what I was wearing, or what I was doing, or what I said? And I would rehearse things over and over after the fact, going, how stupid, and why did I say that, and what must they think? And really, now I think they probably weren't even thinking about me, because most of us think about ourselves. So how many people really were thinking about something that I did? Probably very few. I'm not that important, right? So a lot of us worry about what other people think, when in fact, probably not thinking about us at all. They're probably wondering what you think about them. And this is one that, frankly, is still an area of development for me, because I am very task-focused, very goal-driven. And that is, it was very difficult for me to relax and do nothing. So just, sit on the patio and just look around and enjoy nature. I had to be doing something useful or something productive at all times. So even now, if I have an hour or something where I don't have anything booked, my default is still to look for something useful. God continues to work on me. But it's still connected to performance-oriented identity. Trying to produce, trying to be useful, trying to be worthy or valuable. But I will say 10 years ago it was much worse than it is now. So the results of those 4 areas and other areas of control. So Hebrews 3:19 says about Israel, even though they survived by supernatural means in the wilderness for 40 years, they failed to grasp what God had in mind for them. Their own unbelief or doubt or stress disqualified them from entering his rest. So God was doing all kinds of amazing things around me, working in everybody's lives, doing absolutely astounding things as he does for all of us day after day. And I missed him. I failed to grasp what he had in mind for me because I was so focused on making things happen my way. And so it disqualified me from rest. We were never designed to control. We were designed to rest in God, like the last song said, to rest and to trust. So when we try to control, we experience all kinds of lovely symptoms like sleeplessness, feeling agitated, irritated, worried, angry, frustrated, burdened by stress, depressed, confused, and wavering in doubt, all of which equates to absolutely no rest. So we might get sick, we might break relationships. It ends up giving us exactly what we don't want. It ends up being the opposite of what we're trying to create through our control. But we were never designed to control. We were designed to rest. So why strive to control? For me, and probably for a lot of people, control is just life's baggage. It's the result of our life experiences that have taught us that we can't rely on anyone other than ourselves. So for a lot of us, certainly for me, this was true, that I lost control at some point early in my life, which made me feel very helpless and vulnerable due to abuse. Not so much neglect, but it happens. And so my goal in controlling was to make sure that that never happened again. I was never going to be taken advantage that way again. For some, it's fear of rejection or abandonment, and their control is a way of trying to be invulnerable to further hurt. So they've been rejected or abandoned, and now they're trying to control people, try to control things so that they won't get hurt again. One thing I didn't try to control was people, because that had been the control over me when I was a kid. Some people who are addicted to control, and some are, will extend that control to manipulating people, making them do. I just figured I'd go right to the top and try to control God, so why control people? But no. I'm nothing if not efficient, right? Always going to the top. So anyway, so trying to be invulnerable to further hurt because they've been rejected or abandoned. For some, it's because they feel insecure and defenseless, and the control is a way of protecting them and making them safe. Or they may feel insignificant and lack self-esteem. So control, when things happen the way they want, makes them proves to themselves that they are worth something. They may feel weak, in which case controlling things is a way to make them feel strong. They may be afraid of failure, so controlling is their way of trying to be perfect, as it was for me. They may just generally be fearful. Even Christians live in fear and try to protect themselves. And for me, it also was, I just didn't have enough inner trust that I could handle outcomes other than the ones that I had rehearsed and planned for. I remember a number of years ago driving to Toronto, and I don't go to Toronto very often. It's actually kind of an intimidating city when you've grown up in a small town. And I was barreling down the 401. I was going to a place that I'd never been before, and I didn't know really where my exit was. I knew it was sort of, 10 miles down the road, but I didn't know, because you got collectors and you got express, and there's people whizzing in and out, and I was just completely overwhelmed. And I noticed that I was holding on to the steering wheel absolutely white-knuckled. And in the middle of that, where I'm like heart's beating and I'm just like completely stressed out, God says, "Why are you so stressed?" If you ever say, "Well, duh, God," I would have said that, but I don't, because I respect God. So I basically said, "Well, I'm afraid I'm going to miss my exit." And he said, "So what would happen then?" And I said, "Well, then I might not find my way again. And I might not find where I'm going. I might be late. I might lose this job," whatever it was. And in that moment, I realized that why I was so intimidated is because I didn't trust myself to find my way out of a situation that I'd never been in before. And that had actually been a characteristic of my entire life. So a lot of my planning, a lot of my controlling was trying to set things up so I would know exactly how to act. I would know exactly how to respond. I would know exactly what to do. And that moment was sort of a light bulb moment for me, going, wow, like if I miss my exit, I just take the next one off and I drive back to where I'm going, or I make a phone call. Like, there's many ways, but I'd never even entertained the idea that I could figure it out, because I'd been so relying on other people to tell me what to do. So definitely not enough inner trust. And that was a real turning point for me. So what's the common point with all of these? It's fear. Control is a fear response. These are all defense mechanisms. And when God began to deal with me in this area, he started by saying that he was going to remove everything in my life that I was leaning on that was not of him. And that terrified me. Because all I knew was I had spent decades building up coping mechanisms and ways of operating that I could lean on that would make me successful. And suddenly, God was going to take all those things away. And what was I going to be left with? And I was terrified. And what I didn't see till later was all those things that I was leaning on, it was a house of cards. It actually didn't get me what I wanted anyway. I just thought it did. And what he replaced it with was something amazing. He replaced it with standing on the rock and letting him take care of me. And I'd never been willing to do that before. Fear was standing in the way of me being able to let him take care of me. And a lot of us don't trust him, as we don't see him or ourselves as he is. We judge him, we judge ourselves, we judge everything through this little tiny knothole of pain that we've experienced through our lives. It's narrowed our view. And I just want to read another section from the shack, because again, these are all things that I've gone over multiple times until I got it, because they really spoke to me. So Papa and the Holy Spirit throughout you are talking to Mac, and they say, "We, the Trinity, created you, the human, to be in a face-to-face relationship with us, to join our circle of love. As difficult as it will be for you to understand, And now apply this to yourselves, right? If you've got a struggle in your life right now, just listen to this for you. Understand, and as difficult as it will be for you to understand, everything that has taken place is occurring exactly according to this purpose, without violating choice or will. So what's the purpose? To be in a face-to-face relationship with God, to be in that circle of love, and everything that happens is not willed by Him, but is used by Him to further draw us to Himself if we allow it. There are millions of reasons to allow pain and hurt and suffering rather than to eradicate them, but most of these reasons can only be understood within each person's story. I am not evil. You are the ones who embrace fear and pain and power and rights so readily in your relationships. But your choices are also not stronger than my purposes. So if you've ever been afraid of making the wrong choice, let that be a comfort to you. Your choices are not stronger than God's purposes. It doesn't matter what you choose, in a sense, because He will work with it. I will use every choice you make for the ultimate good and the most loving outcome. A lot of us create stress because we're so worried about finding the perfect will of God. God's created us to have this loving, free-flowing, relaxed relationship with Him where we're free to make choices, trusting that He'll bring about the ultimate good. So then God continues, if you knew I was good. Not knew. If you knew I was good and that everything, the means, the ends, and all the processes of individual lives is all covered by my goodness, then while you might not always understand what I'm doing, you would trust me. But you don't. Trust is the fruit of a relationship in which you know you are loved. And this was the journey that God began to take me on as He began to dismantle my house of cards and things that I was relying on. And He began to convince me of His care and His love. And as I became convinced of that, I became more loving and accepting of myself, which then allowed me to begin to release the control. I'm not saying that I've conquered it. I think it'll probably be a lifetime journey, but I am experiencing a lot more peace and ability to roll with things than I ever did before. What I've discovered is that control narrows your world and limits your options. But trust opens it up to all kinds of new possibilities. And when I began to choose to live in the present, when I began to choose to let God deal with the outcomes and the things that I had been trying to control, it changed the quality of my relationships, it changed the quality of my day-to-day living. I could then just enjoy life so much more. So, how many of you would love 3 steps to living control-free formula, right? Anyone? Absolutely. And join the club, all you controllers, because that's exactly what controllers want. They want to know exactly how to do things. And I say that in love because I am a recovering controller. No, there is no formula. Sorry. God took me on a journey that was tailor-made for me because that's how He operates with each of us. But there are some things that I can suggest that may be helpful to you as a place to start. And the first is, like any 12-step program, we have to acknowledge that there's an issue. And I had to acknowledge to God and to others that I had a control issue. So acknowledge your need to control and then ask for God's help to change that. And really what that looks like is starting to soak yourself and immerse yourself in His love. For me, it was books like The Shack, like I've mentioned. It was Grace, the Grace Message, Grace Walk. It was some leadership development programs I went through that kind of mirrored in my face how I was thinking and what I was believing. Recently, I've been reading this book, beyond an angry God. And this too is absolutely amazing in terms of the perspectives it gives on the heart of God and how he is never angry with us. So a lot of reprogramming. But you start by saying, yeah, I like to control things. God, I need you to help me. Then, because control is fear-based, begin to develop an awareness in that moment where you're feeling stressed and trying to control. What fear is driving me in this moment? Am I afraid of being embarrassed? Am I afraid of failing? Am I afraid of what people are thinking? Am I afraid I'm not going to be able to deal with it? Whatever it might be. Am I afraid of lack? Am I afraid of losing my job? Develop a consciousness of the fears that are driving your need to control. And then, because our spirits are perfect and they know the truth, let your spirit begin to inform your mind. I got this from, in the Mirror translation by Francois Dutoit. He says about Romans 12, where it talks about renewing your mind. I always thought that was, well, you have to study the Bible and you have to kind of cram it into your head and get it to your heart. And he presents a different perspective, which is, actually your heart already knows the truth. So instead of trying to get it from here to here, you need to get it from here to here, which just means the consciousness, the awareness of what the fears are, and allowing your spirit, that faith in your spirit, to begin to inform your mind. And then start to make different choices, because at the end of the day, that's what we've got control over, is our choices. Even if you've made a choice and you realize after the fact, okay, I was trying to control something there, just make a different choice. This is kind of my life verse, if you will. When I had first given my life to God, there was a man of God who came through and basically spoke this over me in a prophetic sense. Luke 10:38, where Jesus says, to a woman whose heart is to serve and to give, but she's missing the whole point of having Jesus in her house for lunch. He says, Martha, Martha. And I imagine him saying, Martha, Martha, you're worried and troubled about so many things. He said it out of a tender heart, not a condemning, harsh, Martha, Martha, what is wrong with you? Right? Martha, Martha, you're worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part. So we choose. Do we want to be stressed? Do we want to try and control things? Do we want to live subject to fear? Or do we connect with our Mary's heart that's in all of us and choose that good part, which is rest? It is a choice. Lots of choices we can make. The first one, and these were things that kind of made me shake my head and realize that I was thinking of things in a wrong way. But the first thing I had to realize was that, frankly, as much as I was trying to control stuff, I wasn't in control of anything. Right? Like, so I'm the kind of person that wants to be places. If I have to be there at 3, I want to be there at 10:02, and I want everything to be kind of lined up so I've got lots of time to respond if things come up. But I began to realize there is nothing, really, that I can control. You get in your car early for an appointment and the car breaks down. Or there's an accident on the highway. Or there's a detour. There's a few of those around here these days. So construction makes you add 15 minutes to your day. And I began to realize that as much as I thought I was in control of stuff, I really wasn't in control of anything. Really. So I could plan to my heart's content, and all it took was one person or one thing happening to throw off all my plans. So, it's a lot easier if you realize that, heck, you can't control anything. The only thing you can control is how you think and how you respond to situations. But if you realize that you can plan, but you've got no control, because people will do what people do. The construction crews will do what construction crews do. Exactly. So there's so much out of our control. And you're better off just to accept that, and go, okay, I'll do what I can, but I recognize that I'm going to hold it very loosely. The second thing to realize in terms of controlling your future, well, the future will never come. The future is always the future. So live in the present, enjoy each moment. Instead of being in church thinking about what you're going to have for lunch, or waiting for your kids to graduate from school, or whatever it might be, just live in the present, enjoy each day. And then those milestones happen, and I've been there, I understand. And part of me wishes that I had been more present in the growing up years, because then those milestones wouldn't be as sad maybe as they were for me. But living in the present allows you to extract the maximum out of each moment. And again, you have a choice of what you dwell on. Don't dwell on the worrisome thoughts about what might happen or might not happen. Like the thing in the shack said, half the time they never happen, or most of the time they never happen. And when we're worried, we're not thinking about God in those things. So guard your thoughts. Recognize, and I had to, as perfect as I thought I was, and as perfect as my results were in my head, I had to come to realize that actually there are many ways to achieve results. And just because I happen to think I'm right doesn't make me right. My way is just one of many ways. So in Daniel, the 3 Hebrews about to be thrown into the furnace really had a handle on this, because they said, God's able to deliver us supernaturally. He'll just take us out of here. He could. But even if he doesn't, we're still not going to bow. And I had to come to realize that I can plan lots. I'm a good planner, but the unexpected will and does happen, and that I could just relax in it. So if you ever want to give me a surprise baby shower again, I will not react that way. There's about a 0% chance of that happening, so, Yeah, grand baby shower, yeah. The other thing I had to accept was that things don't need to look a certain way. I have my preferences. I like things being a certain way. When back in the early days of our marriage, I'd get so uptight about being hospitable because things had to look a certain way, and I'd be so caught up in serving the guests that I'd spend no time with them and enjoy their company. Until one day, my very wise husband said, they haven't come to see how clean your house is, or how good your food tastes, or how well you can serve them. They've come to see you. I was like, okay. So I let go of the way things needed to look. I still have preferences, but I'm getting much better at accepting that there are many different things that I would have never thought of that might actually be more enjoyable than what I had in mind. We're simply not qualified to judge anybody. We have imperfect measures that are the sum total of all of our life experiences, and we all have standards of measure that really are flawed because they're based on a humanistic worldview. And even if we had perfectly embraced the God of love and we thought just the way he did, we're still not qualified. So let go of the judgment. When I got to the place of accepting me as I was, I started to find that I was a lot less judgmental of people because I started to accept them as they were. Because the behavior is not who they are. Who they are is who they are on the inside. But I had to realize, and this was kind of tough for me because I thought I had it together, but I was not qualified to judge anybody. Recognize that you're loved for who you are, not your performance. So there's everything in you to accept and love. It doesn't matter whether you do everything right. It doesn't matter whether your agenda is perfect. It doesn't matter whether you're all made up when you go for a baby shower. None of that matters. Because you are who you are. And nothing you do will ever change that essence in you, that perfect being that reflects a facet of God perfectly. So you are loved for who you are. Your actions don't change God's love or perspective on you a bit. He continues to pursue you as you are. So when stress rears its head and points to a poisonous thought, like the poisonous thought alarm that it is, just stop and say, what am I thinking? What is creating the stress for me? What am I trying to control? And then, if I was a singer, I do the Frozen Let It Go, but I'm not a singer, so I'll spare you that. But really, let it go. Let it go, because when you let it go, you open yourself up to new possibilities. When you let go of your need to control, you will be free. Thank you.